Welcome back. Tonight's story isn't just disturbing, it's something that will stay with you long after it ends. This is the story of two boys who didn't just break the rules, they rewrote them. The Quiet Boy from Maple Street. Part 1. The Perfect Neighborhood. Maple Street looked like something out of a postcard. White fences, green lawns, kids riding bikes, mothers chatting over coffee. Nothing ever went wrong here, or at least, that's what people believed. At number 17 lived Ethan Cole, a 12-year-old boy with pale skin, soft brown hair, and eyes that seemed older than they should be. To outsiders, Ethan was quiet, polite, a little shy. To his teachers he was gifted but withdrawn. To his parents he was different but special. But no one, not a single soul, knew what Ethan really was. The first incident, it started small. A missing cat. Mrs. Peterson's orange tabby, Milo, vanished one afternoon. The neighborhood searched for days. Posters went up. Kids called his name. Ethan helped. He even cried when they gave up. But deep in the woods behind Maple Street, buried beneath loose dirt and leaves, Milo lay lifeless. Ethan stood over the small grave that night. Not sad, not scared, just curious. He tilted his head and whispered softly, "Why did you stop moving?" Something is wrong. Ethan wasn't like other kids. He didn't feel things the same way. When his classmates laughed, he studied them, like a scientist observing an experiment. When someone cried, he didn't comfort them. He watched, fascinated. At school, a boy named Jake bullied him. One day, Jake shoved Ethan hard against a locker. "Freak," Jake muttered. Ethan didn't react. He just stared. That same cold, emotionless stare. And something clicked in his mind. The disappearance of Jake Miller. Jake never made it home that evening. Search parties flooded the town. Police questioned everyone. Ethan sat at the dinner table that night, quietly eating. His mother asked, "Did you see Jake after school?" Ethan shook his head slowly. No. It wasn't entirely a lie. Jake had been alive the last time Ethan saw him. The secret place. Behind Maple Street, beyond the trees, there was an abandoned shed, half collapsed, forgotten. That's where Ethan went. That's where he experimented. Jake had screamed at first, cried, begged, promised to never bully him again. Ethan listened carefully to every sound. He wasn't angry. He wasn't getting revenge. He was learning. "How long," Ethan whispered, "does it take?" Jake never answered. Eventually, the shed fell silent. Ethan wrote everything down in a small notebook. Time, reactions, changes, like a scientist recording data. The investigation. Detective Laura Hayes was assigned to the case. Something felt off. Kids don't just disappear in neighborhoods like this. She went door to door, asking questions. When she reached Ethan's house, she noticed something strange. Ethan didn't act like the other kids. He didn't seem scared. He didn't seem sad. He seemed interested. "Do you know what happened to Jake?" she asked gently. Ethan looked up at her. Those eyes, too calm, too empty. "I think," he said quietly, "something bad happened." Detective Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. The pattern. Weeks passed. Then another child disappeared. A girl this time. Emily Sanders. The town panicked. Now it wasn't just one case. It was a pattern. Detective Hayes dug deeper. Same area. Same time of day. No witnesses. No evidence. Except one thing. Every victim had last been seen near the woods. The discovery. One evening, Detective Hayes searched the forest alone. Something caught her eye. A broken path. Footprints. Small ones. They led to the abandoned shed. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Then the sight. Drawings, notes, objects. And in the corner, a small notebook. She opened it. Her hands trembled as she read. Subject 2, Jake Miller. Reaction, fear, crying, screaming. Time, 47 minutes. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just a killer. This was a child. The truth comes out. That night, police surrounded Ethan's house. His parents were confused, terrified. "What's going on?" his mother cried. Detective Hayes stepped forward. "Where is your son?" Ethan walked down the stairs calmly. No panic, no confusion, just silence. He looked at Detective Hayes and asked, "Did you find my notebook?" The mind of a monster. During interrogation, Ethan didn't act like a criminal. He didn't deny anything. He didn't show guilt. He answered every question like it was a school assignment. "Why did you do it?" they asked. Ethan tilted his head. "I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "What happens when people stop working?" The room went silent. Even the officers couldn't speak. This wasn't anger. This wasn't trauma. This was something far colder. The diagnosis. Psychologists evaluated Ethan for weeks. The results shocked everyone. No empathy, no remorse, no emotional response to suffering. A rare and extreme case of child psychopathy. But even among such cases, Ethan was different. More controlled, more aware, more dangerous. The ending or beginning? Ethan was placed in a high-security juvenile psychiatric facility, locked away, watched 24/7. But even there, the staff felt uneasy, because Ethan never cried, never panicked, never broke down. He just observed. One night, a nurse asked him, "Do you feel bad for what you did?" Ethan looked at her, that same empty stare, and smiled slightly. Part 2. The Copycat. The silence after. The town of Maple Street never recovered. Parents stopped letting their children play outside. Bikes gathered dust. The laughter that once filled the neighborhood was replaced with locked doors and quiet fear. Everyone believed the nightmare was over. Ethan Cole had been taken away, locked up, gone. But fear doesn't disappear that easily. It waits. Another disappearance. 6 months later, in a nearby town, Ridgewood, another child vanished. A 10-year-old boy. No witnesses, no signs of struggle, just gone. At first, the police thought it was unrelated, until they found something. A small piece of paper, folded carefully. Inside, written in neat handwriting. Subject 1. Reaction panic. Time, 32 minutes. Detective Laura Hayes stared at it in disbelief. "No," she whispered. "This can't be happening again." A shadow imitates. The media exploded. Copycat killer? Another child predator? But Detective Hayes knew better. This wasn't just imitation. It was precise, calculated. Whoever did this had seen Ethan's notes, or worse, understood them. Inside the facility, hundreds of miles away, Ethan sat in a white room. Blank walls, metal bed, a small table, and a notebook this time provided by doctors. He spent hours writing, drawing, observing. A psychologist, Dr. Hayes. Helen Morris studied him closely. "You're writing a lot," she said one day. Ethan nodded. "I like patterns." "Patterns of what?" "People." Morris leaned forward. "Do you ever think about what you did?" Ethan paused, then asked, "Are they still looking for me?" When news of the Ridgewood case reached the facility, staff were alarmed. Security tightened immediately. No outside contact, no media exposure. But one thing didn't make sense. Ethan had no access to the outside world. No phone, no internet, no visitors except approved staff. So how could someone copy him so perfectly? Detective Hayes re-examined Ethan's old notebook. Every page, every word. That's when she noticed something strange. At the bottom of one page, almost invisible, was a symbol. A small circle with a line through it. She checked the new note from Ridgewood. Same symbol, same exact shape. Her heart sank. This isn't random, she said. This is communication. There was only one explanation. Someone had seen Ethan's notes before he was caught. Someone who understood his thinking. Someone who admired it. A student, a neighbor, a friend, or worse, someone who had been watching him all along. Another child disappeared. Then another. Each time a note appeared. Each time the same format. Subject number, emotional response, duration. It was evolving, getting more detailed, more clinical. Detective Hayes realized something terrifying. This one isn't just copying. They're improving. Back to Maple Street. Hayes returned to Maple Street. She walked past Ethan's old house, the empty yard, the quiet windows. Then she noticed something. Across the street, a boy sitting on the curb, watching her. He looked about 13, thin, pale, and very still. Too still. Daniel Reed. His name was Daniel Reed. He had lived across from Ethan. Same age, same school. But unlike Ethan, Daniel had been invisible. Quiet, ignored, forgotten. Teachers described him as harmless. Neighbors barely remembered him. But Ethan had noticed him. Of course he had. The connection. When questioned, Daniel seemed calm, polite, cooperative. "Did you know Ethan?" Hayes asked. Daniel nodded. He was interesting. How so? Daniel smiled slightly. He didn't pretend like other people. Hayes felt that same cold chill. "Did you ever go into the woods with him?" Daniel looked straight into her eyes. No. It was the same answer Ethan had once given. The truth begins to crack. That night, Hayes couldn't sleep. Something about Daniel felt familiar. Too familiar. She reviewed old footage from the investigation, body cam videos, search teams, and then she saw him, in the background, standing near the woods, watching, not helping, just watching. Two minds, one darkness. Daniel wasn't just copying Ethan. He had been studying him, learning from him, admiring him. Where Ethan experimented out of curiosity, Daniel experimented out of purpose. Ethan wanted to understand. Daniel wanted to continue. The realization. Detective Hayes whispered to herself, this didn't start with Ethan. He just wasn't the only one. Back in the White Room, at the facility, Dr. Hayes. Morris sat across from Ethan. "Ethan," she said carefully, "how would you feel if someone did the same things you did?" Ethan thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I'd want to meet them." Final line of part 2. Somewhere out there, another child was learning. But this time, he wasn't alone. Part 3. The Connection. The Watcher Revealed. Detective Laura Hayes didn't wait. At dawn, she drove straight back to Maple Street with a warrant in hand. Daniel Reed's house stood silent. Too silent. When officers entered, everything looked normal. Family photos, school books, a neatly made bed. But Hayes had learned something from Ethan. The truth is never in plain sight. Check everything, she ordered. Closets, floors, walls. Then, Detective, you need to see this. The basement. Hidden behind a false panel in Daniel's room was a narrow staircase. It led down, into darkness. The smell hit first, damp, metallic, wrong. Flashlights flicked on, and then silence. Because what they saw didn't look like chaos, it looked organized. A chair, ropes, a small desk, and on it, a notebook. Cleaner than Ethan's, more detailed, more precise. Hayes flipped it open. Subject 4. Reaction, controlled panic. Observation, silence achieved faster. Time, 21 minutes. Her hands tightened. She whispered. The missing piece. But Daniel wasn't there. He had vanished, just like the others. Except this time, the hunter had become the hunted. Inside Ethan's mind. Back at the facility, something had changed. Ethan had become restless. Not emotional, not afraid, just alert, like he was waiting. Dr. Morris noticed it immediately. "You seem different today," she said. Ethan looked at her calmly. "He's getting better." Morris froze. "Who is?" Ethan smiled faintly. "The other one. The impossible leak. Security at the facility was airtight. No messages in, no messages out. And yet, Ethan knew. Not details, not names, but enough. It wasn't communication in the normal sense. It was recognition. Pattern recognizing pattern. Mind recognizing mind. Daniel's move. Daniel Reed wasn't running blindly. He had a plan. He had studied Ethan long before anyone noticed. He knew the mistakes. He knew what got Ethan caught. And he wouldn't repeat them. No bodies. No obvious trails. No panic. Just precision. A new kind of fear. Another child disappeared. But this time, no note, no evidence, nothing. It was worse than before, because now there was no pattern to follow. Hayes realized the truth. He's evolving past Ethan. The bait. Hayes made a risky decision. She went public, a statement broadcast across the region. "We know who you are. We know what you're doing. And we will find you." It was a gamble. Because people like Daniel don't fear attention. They crave acknowledgement. The response. 2 days later, a letter arrived. No fingerprints, no return address. Inside, a single page. "You're still looking at him. You should be looking ahead." And at the bottom, that same symbol. Circle, line. The trap forms. Hayes studied the message. "You're still looking at him, Ethan. You should be looking ahead, Daniel." He wasn't just killing. He was communicating, challenging, playing. Chapter 38. Ethan's Request. Back at the facility, Ethan made his first unusual request. "I want to speak to the detective," he said. Morris hesitated. Why? Ethan's answer was simple. "I think I can help." For the first time since his capture, Ethan and Detective Hayes sat face to face again. Glass between them. Guards nearby. Silence filled the room. Then Hayes spoke. "There's another one." Ethan nodded. "I know." "Who is he?" Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Not like me." "How?" "I wanted to understand." A pause. "He wants to continue." Hayes leaned forward. "Where is he going next?" Ethan looked directly at her, and for the first time there was something new in his expression. Not emotion, not fear, but something close to interest. "He's not choosing places," Ethan said quietly. "He's choosing moments." Hayes frowned. "What does that mean?" Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's waiting for the right ending." Suddenly it hit her. This wasn't random escalation. This was building towards something. A final act. A statement. Something bigger than the others. The countdown begins. Hayes rushed out of the room. Alerts were sent. Schools warned. Parks closed. But deep down, she knew something terrifying. They weren't stopping him. They were reacting. Was always one step ahead. Final line of Part 3. Somewhere in the shadows, Daniel Reed watched the chaos unfold. And for the first time, he smiled. Because the final experiment was about to begin. The Quiet Boy from Maple Street. Part 4. The Final Experiment. Chapter 43. The Pattern Breaks. Detective Laura Hayes stood in the command room, staring at maps, timelines, and reports covering the walls. Every disappearance, every location, every detail. And yet, nothing pointed to where Daniel would strike next. Because Ethan had been predictable. Daniel wasn't. "He's not following a pattern," Hayes muttered. Then she remembered Ethan's words. "He's choosing moments, not places, moments." That meant something public, something symbolic, something that would be seen. Her eyes widened. The target, Maple Street. 1 year since Jake disappeared. The town had planned a memorial gathering. Families, children, media, a moment of shared grief and visibility. Hayes grabbed her radio. Shut it down. Now. Cancel everything. But it was too late. People were already gathering. The crowd. Candles flickered along the sidewalks. Parents held their children close. Names of the lost were spoken softly. And in the middle of it all, Daniel stood quietly among them, blending in, watching, learning, waiting. The intention. Daniel wasn't there for chaos. He wasn't there for panic. He was there for something far more disturbing. Control. This wasn't just another act. This was a message, a demonstration, a final experiment to prove something, that fear could be created, shaped, and observed on a larger scale. The interruption. Police cars arrived, lights flashing. Officers moved through the crowd, scanning faces. Hayes pushed through people, her eyes searching desperately. "Find him," she ordered. But Daniel didn't run. He never planned to. The choice. Across the street, Hayes saw him, standing still, looking directly at her. No fear, no panic, just calm. She approached slowly. "Daniel," she said firmly, "it's over." He smiled faintly. "No," he replied quietly. "This is the end." The conversation. They stood face to face. The noise of the crowd faded behind them. "You don't have to do this," Hayes said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "That's what you told him too, didn't you?" Ethan. Air without being spoken. "You're not him," Hayes said. Daniel's smile widened just a little. "I know." A pause. "I'm better." The truth. Hayes kept her voice steady. "Why, Daniel? Why all of this?" For the first time. He answered with something more than curiosity. "Because people lie," he said softly. "Pretend to care." He glanced at the crowd. "They only understand things when it's taken away from them." Hayes shook her head. "That's not true." Daniel looked back at her. "Then why are they all here now?" The final move. Hayes stepped closer. "Whatever you think this proves, it won't fix anything." Daniel's eyes didn't move. "It's not about fixing," he said. "It's about showing." A tense silence followed. Every second stretched. Then, Daniel slowly raised his hands, not in surrender, but calmly, deliberately. "I'm done," he said. The arrest. Officers rushed in. Daniel was taken into custody without resistance. No struggle. No chaos. The crowd didn't even realize what had almost happened. To them, it was just another night of mourning. Aftermath. The town was safe. No final act. No large-scale tragedy. But it didn't feel like a victory, because Hayes understood something chilling. Daniel hadn't failed. He had chosen to stop. Two minds. Weeks later, in separate facilities, two boys sat in silence. Ethan Cole, Daniel Reed. Different places, same stillness, same eyes, observers, not participants. The final conversation. Detective Hayes visited Ethan one last time. "It's over," she said. "He's been caught." Ethan listened quietly, then asked, Did he finish it?" Hayes frowned. "Finish what?" Ethan looked at her. And for a brief moment, it was something almost like disappointment. The experiment. The ending. Or not. That note, Hayes reviewed Daniel's final notes. One line stood out. Final observation. Control is not in the act. It is in the decision to stop. Hayes leaned back slowly, realizing the truth. Daniel hadn't wanted to destroy everything. He wanted to prove he could. And that was enough. Part 5. What Remains? The Illusion of Safety. Months passed. Maple Street slowly came back to life. Children returned to the sidewalks. Laughter echoed again. The news moved on. To everyone else, it was over. 2 boys caught, 2 monsters contained. The story finished. But Detective Laura Hayes knew better. Because some things don't end. They change form. The separate silence. Ethan Cole and Daniel Reed were kept far apart. Different facilities, different states, no contact, no communication, no connection. That was the plan. But the problem was never proximity. It was similarity. Daniel's stillness. Daniel adapted quickly, too quickly. Doctors described him as compliant, calm, cooperative. But his reports had one recurring note. Subject shows awareness beyond expected level. He followed rules, answered questions, smiled when appropriate, learned, always learned. Ethan's observation. Ethan hadn't changed either. But unlike Daniel, he didn't pretend. He didn't try to fit in. He remained exactly what he was, still, quiet, watching. When a doctor asked him one day, "Do you think about Daniel?" Ethan replied simply, "Yes." "What do you think about him?" A pause, then, "He stopped too early." The uneasy reports. Strange things began happening in both facilities. Nothing violent, nothing obvious, just subtle. Staff disagreements, security lapses, minor rule-breaking among patients. Small disturbances, but spreading. The influence. It wasn't direct. There were no orders, no commands. But somehow, both boys had an effect on people. A way of speaking, a way of watching, a way of making others uncomfortable. And sometimes, curious. The first incident. In Daniel's facility, a boy attacked another patient. Unprovoked. When questioned, he said something strange. "I just wanted to see what would happen." The exact words. The same tone. The same reasoning. As Ethan. A growing pattern. More incidents followed. Small, controlled, but similar. Curiosity replacing empathy. Observation replacing emotion. It wasn't spreading like a disease. It was spreading like an idea. Hayes returns. Detective Hayes was called back, not for a crime, for a concern. She reviewed reports from both facilities, read transcripts, behavioral notes, and one realization hit her harder than anything before. They're still doing it. The real experiment. Ethan and Daniel were no longer experimenting on victims. They were experimenting on systems, on people, on environments, without touching them, without breaking rules, just by existing, by influencing. The final visit. Hayes decided to visit Daniel this time. He sat calmly across from her. "You look tired," he said. Hayes ignored it. "People are getting hurt again." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Are they?" "You know they are." A pause. Then he smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything." And that was the worst part. He was telling the truth. The mirror. Later, Hayes visited Ethan. "You were wrong," she said. Ethan looked up. "About what?" He didn't stop too early. Ethan waited. Hayes leaned forward. He just changed the experiment. For the first time, Ethan's expression shifted. Not emotion, but recognition. Chapter 69. The Understanding. Ethan spoke quietly. "No boundaries," he said. Hayes felt a chill. "No limits," Ethan continued. "No need for subjects." A pause. Then, better. The uncontainable truth. The system could lock them away, control their movements, monitor their actions. But it couldn't stop what they represented, because the real danger was never just what they did. It was how they thought, and how easily that thinking could spread. The last entry. Weeks later, Hayes received a report. In Daniel's file, a new note had been written. Final observation revised. Control is not in action or restraint. It is in influence. Final line of the entire story. And somewhere in quiet rooms behind locked doors, 2 boys sat in silence, still learning, still watching, still proving that the most dangerous monsters don't need freedom. They just need time. Thanks for watching. And remember, some stories don't end when they're over. They stay with you.